Lately, I've had an obsession. What is the ultimate winter tactic? And with so many different options out there, from maggots to zig rigs to single hook bait fishing, boilie crumb, high carbohydrate baits and just liquids, it's no wonder anglers can get confused as to what is the best approach for the winter. After a good hard think and reflecting back on my own winter sessions, and I think I've found the perfect method, the Maggot solid bag. So in this video, of course, I'm going to be talking to you all about solid bags. The winds this session have been absolutely horrendous, so I'm actually using solid bags with maggots. Yeah, and in this video, I'm going to give you a full guide all about how to fish solid bags with maggots, and hopefully that will incorporate a few fish onto the bank for you throughout the winter months. I'm actually right at the end of my first session of the Christmas holidays now. I've been fishing with Ashley down on Buzzard Valley Vineyard Lake. We've had a brilliant time. He's had 3 as well.
Well, what a lovely start to the session. Just using solid bags full of maggots, simple little rig. Yeah, hopefully we'll have some more. Well, what a lovely session this is turning out to be. Second fish for me, using maggots in solid bags. Hopefully have a few more.
I'm actually moving down to Todber Manor in a few days' time. I've actually got another one in the sling, so I'll show you that. And then the next time you see me, we'll be down at Todber Manor. So that's the second fish. I think this one's actually got a little bit of ghosty in it. Yeah, it's been a brilliant first session of the Christmas holidays for me. And in this video, I'm going to show you a variety of different things, from the lead systems to how to keep your maggots fresh so they don't sweat, and obviously melt that solid bag too early. So yeah, without further ado, the next time you see me, we'll be down at Todber Manor, where the first thing we'll talk about is the lead systems. Happy, happy days. What a wonderful little Christmas present. So as I said, when I was down at Buzzard Valley, I'm going to talk to you all about solid bags, and particularly the past couple of sessions I have been using maggots inside my solid bags. With the amount of storms we've had recently, it makes spodding very light items like maggots, etc. just an absolute nightmare. They're going to drift everywhere and going to be nowhere near your spot. So a solid bag of maggots is the perfect tactic to use in those sort of conditions. So I'm going to run you through absolutely everything that I do with regards to solid bags and maggot fishing, from how to keep your maggots fresh, from the lead systems to the rigs to the hook baits, etc, etc, etc. And hopefully it will catch you a few carp this winter. So we'll start off with the lead systems. In the Trakker range, basically you've got 2 different options. So your first option is one of my favourites, and that is just a simple solid bag stem. My favourite ones is the one that has a ring swivel on, and basically how these work, you take your Trakker lead, and it will have to be a Trakker lead just for safety reasons. My preferred one in weight is a 3-ounce lead. It gives me a good amount of distance, and when that's sort of with a bag, etc, you're probably looking at anything around between 4 and 4.5. So you take your lead, and you're going to take the inner, the little black plastic that it comes with, take that out, and then quite simply you just slide it on, and it just slots in place like so. It is a drop-off system as well, so when you have a rig attached, that will pull off and there's a little groove on the lead, and that obviously just drops off, and then you're just in direct contact with the actual fish. Just with regards to safety reasons with these, and I found this with all solid bag stems from a variety of different companies. If you do actually if you tie in loads and loads and loads of solid bags in advance, these can dry out and it can be unsafe. It becomes very stiff to get that lead off. So when I am tying loads of solid bags in advance, all I do is just get a little bit of Vaseline and just rub it around the edge here, just where that lead is going to sit. And it will just mean that that won't occur when you're tying them in advance. It won't dry off. And that will just always mean that that lead is always going to come off on the take, or if it's snagged up or anything like that, it's perfectly safe. Now, the system that I've been using over the past couple of weeks is actually a lead-free leader, and I'm using a drop-off system. If there's no leader bands on the lake that I'm fishing, I always prefer to use some form of leader, and I'm fishing this leader drop-off style. Now, how you set this up, the actual material that I'm using here is the 60-pound lead-free leader, and this comes in a nice green colour, and it's pretty subtle on the lake bed, and I've just spliced this. In terms of how I splice it, that's really important for the drop-off system. So I'm using a size 8 ring swivel, and instead of actually splicing like you would with a lead clip, instead of splicing on the actual swivel itself, I've actually spliced onto the ring. So I'm splicing onto the large ring there, and the way this works, this time round, you're going to leave in the actual black bit that comes with the lead. You're going to leave that in, and you push that onto the actual non-ring swivel section. You push that into the front of the actual stem, just pull that into place, and then you thread your actual leader around the back, and then with your tail rubber, so you've got a little tail rubber that you would use with a lead clip. Your tail rubber slots over that exposed black plastic bit, and that just locks that into place. And basically all that happens is when you've got a fish, it'll pull. So I'll just show you here. It'll pull like so out of place. Your lead won't be attached to anything apart from the tail rubber then, and that just comes straight off. So that is the 2 lead arrangements that you've got for solid bags. It has to be an inline, don't use a lead clip, and setting it up that way, it is the perfect way to set up for a solid bag. So that's the first one of the session. Well happy with that one. Of course, coming to the Maggot solid bags. I've now shown you the leads that you need to use and lead systems. Let's now have a look at the rigs and the hook bait options. So rigs and hook baits are very personal, and for me, my favourite rig generally inside a solid bag is just a simple Ronnie rig. The reason why, because I'm generally, when I'm fishing solid bags, it's in the winter, I'm fishing runs waters and that sort of things, and I just want something that I don't have to constantly be tying. I can just change the hook around really quick, and the Ronnie rig is suited perfectly for that. In terms of the materials and the hook that I'm using, so I'm using the 30-pound Raid uncoated braid. So that's an uncoated braid specifically for solid bags, and the length of the actual boom section of this rig is around 4¼ inches. For me, inside a solid bag, you don't want anything too long basically, because it just ends up quite coiled and it can sit a bit weird inside your solid bag. So yeah, 4¼ inches of boom is absolutely perfect. In terms of what I've got on there, I've got a little sinker just to pin that down inside. Oh, I'm actually in. Oh yeah, nice scaly one. That'll do. Right, that looks a really good fish actually. So that's yeah, the second fish of the session. So happy days. I'll just quickly talk you through the rig and then we'll get her out. So as I was saying, yeah, this is a 30-pound uncoated braid. This is the Raid braid, and then around about 3/4 of the way up, just so it sits in the bag nicely. It makes it a lot easier to tie when you're actually putting the rig into the bag as well, is just a little small sinker. I've then just got a size 11 Ronnie swivel, and this is a size 4 wide gape hook. These are really sharp, they've got a really nice beaked point on them, and I find them perfect for a solid bag. And then all I've done is just a little bit of 2mm shrink tube, just shrunk down with a lighter. And then, yeah, it's just a Ronnie rig. So then just a little micro ring swivel. Obviously you've got a hook bead on there as well. And then, yeah, the all-important hook bait. Now, you could use a maggot hook bait, but in solid bags and when you're piercing maggots and things like that, it just ends up a little bit of a nightmare. And when you're in a rush as well, trying to thread maggots on, as I said, when I'm fishing runs waters, I just want to do speed, especially if I'm having to tie maggot solid bags every time I have a fish. So to make life a little bit easier, I've got a 10mm pop-up on there, but this actually sits like a wafter because they're really, really heavily boosted in the matching raspberry booster liquid. And then I've just got a little fake pink maggot on there, and I've just blobbed that down. So how this sits, it's just going to sit exactly like a wafter would. So just hovering above all of those maggots and all the bits of boilie crumb that I'm using in there as well. And that's absolutely perfect for a solid bag. If I was just using a standard solid bag, say with pellets and things like that, I'd still use a little 10mm raspberry wafter. If I was tying loads of solid bags in advance with pellet, and I was maybe using them a month or 6 weeks or something along those lines, I would use plastic, and I'd just use 2 grains of plastic corn. The reason why is because these can basically dry out and it can make them more buoyant than you would actually want them. So if I was tying them in an advance, maybe for a match, or if I was just wanting to be really prepared, you know, for an session in advance, I just use a couple of pieces of corn. And my maggots and my fake corn, I just keep them in a boilie tub or a pop-up tub, and I soak these in hemp oil. And these have been in there now for, well, the last time I went to Abbey Lake, so a couple of years ago now. And I just, every time I feel like they're drying out, I just add more hemp oil in there, and that's all I add to my plastics, just a little bit of hemp oil. So I suppose that's enough for me talking about rigs and hook baits. Let's have a look at this fish. Well, what a lovely interruption to this tutorial, and just proof in the pudding that those maggot solid bags are working. So it's probably time now that I show you the actual mix that I'm using inside the solid bags and how to keep your maggots fresh during your time on the bank, because that can be a real nightmare for some anglers. Yeah, absolute stunner this one. Let's get a slip back. Now, there's no doubting that maggots are an amazing winter bait, but they are a bit of a nightmare at times to keep, particularly if they start sweating. If they start sweating in your PVA bag fishing, of course, you may as well just not bother, because it's just going to melt your PVA. Now, in terms of how I prepare my maggots in advance, and this just dumbs them down and makes them really easy to tie, so I'll quickly talk you through that now before showing you how to construct a maggot solid bag. So the way that I do it, obviously just buy them from a tackle shop, and they'll come in maize flour. And the first thing they'll do, just with a colander at home, is just sieve all that maize flour off. And then I'll actually put them in a load of krill meal. And yeah, krill meal, it is buoyant, which I'm not bothered about, but for some reason it just generally soaks in some of that like little liquid that maggots can produce when they are wriggling about. So I'll dry them off completely in krill meal, and I'll use loads of it. And then from there, I'll transfer them into just a little freezer bag, and I'll basically roll it up like a sausage roll and just take all of the air out of that bag completely. And by taking all of the air out of that bag completely, it just dumbs the maggots down. They've got no air to breathe, and it just stops them riddling about completely. I've had these now for a week, and they are perfectly fine that way, and I'm sure they'd last, you know, a good few days after this session even as well. This is what my maggots will look like. Just a load and load of krill meal. As I said, there is a lot in there, but they're not moving at all, they're not riddling about, they're not sweating, which of course means that they won't melt your PVA. Now, in terms of my actual mix that I use inside my solid bag, I do like to use a combination of different things. I don't just use straight maggot. But the first thing, of course, that I'm going to do is use the maggot and the krill meal. So just a handful of that, a handful of everything basically goes in here. So it's the maggots and the krill meal. And then from there, again, I will prepare this in advance at home. This is a mixture of 2 different boilies. So this is a mixture of the bug and the switch in boilie crumb, and I pre-soak this in smoke as well, which gives it obviously a really nice smoke inside the solid bag. So just a handful of that, and basically this again will help to compress the solid bag a little bit more than you would if you just had just maggots in there. So just a handful, or slightly less than a handful even, of the actual boilie crumb. And that's going to form the majority of the actual bag. So I'm not using loads and loads of maggots. I basically want it to look like a wayward spawn, so to speak. That's how I want it to look. Now, in terms of the actual size of the solid bag that I'm using the medium. In terms of the solid bag sizes that Trakker do, so they do a small, medium and a large. If I was casting really long distances, obviously I'd use a small. Medium is the perfect size for most of the distances that I fish. And then large, I would use that if I'm fishing heavy weed and I want to punch through that weed. So to tie the actual solid bag, just take a medium solid bag from the packet. Now these bags are quite long, so I do trim them down. So I'm going to take about 1 inch off the top of this bag, and it just makes it a little bit easier to tie. It just allows you to sort of allow the lead to sit with your finger before you actually put the lead into the bag. Just open that up. And then I'm going to put a little bit of pellet at the bottom, because obviously the last thing you want is your hook to be masked by any maggots that you're putting in there. So just a spoonful of pellet, and my hook is going to sit upside down at the actual bottom. Now, in terms of when you are tying a maggot solid bag as well, obviously a lot of people tie bags, don't they, where you put your lead in the middle and then you put your hook actually on top of the lead. You can't really do that with maggot solid bags, so it's just your standard where your hook bait goes at the bottom, lead in the middle, and that's how you tie it. So take your rig. As I said, the placement of the rig is really important. You want your hook point facing downwards. The last thing you want is that hook point facing upwards, because of course, if those maggots do wake up in the process of tying it, it's going to mask your hook. So just put that in, just manipulate it so that your hook point is sitting down like so. So you can see there's no way that a maggot is going to get onto that actual hook point. From there, I will just put a little bit more pellet in, just to make sure that it's completely covered. Just push that down. And I'll just add a tiny bit of boilie crumb, again just to further protect it. And now we'll start to add my maggots. So again, with a spoon, try not to make too much mess. Just add in your maggots into there. Then your lead. Again, just make sure that your lead isn't actually your braid isn't wrapped around your lead as such, so you just need to manipulate a little bit. And you can just push your lead down like so, just compress them in. And obviously all that ground bait, etc., is going to make the bag quite tight. Okay. And just a few more maggots. These maggots aren't moving at all, which makes them really easy to use inside your solid bag. Just fill them up. Just keep pushing it down just to tighten everything up. Another spoon in. Right, and then I'm right towards the top of the bag now. So the final thing I'll do, because when you are tightening this up, the last thing you want, of course, is to pierce a maggot, and then it's going to melt the bag. So I'll just add a little bit of boilie crumb just at the top. Just push that down, and I will add just a little bit of pellet on the top as well, like so. And from there, I'm just going to push all this down just to actually make it a little bit more aerodynamic. Just keep working your bag, they're really durable, they're not going to split. Now you're never ever going to get these as tight as you would a normal solid bag. You know, the maggots are very, I suppose they're just not hard, are they? So you're never going to get it as hard as a normal solid bag, but that is super tight, it's going to go flying. So obviously just wrap like so. So I've took the majority of the air out of that bag just by turning the excess PVA. I'm then going to take some PVA tape. I do like to use quite a lot of PVA tape. And you're just going to wrap this around. So I like to go around 4 times on one side, and I'll take the other tag, 4 on the other side, and just put it between your knees. And then it's just a case of a couple of granny knots. Generally do 3 or 4 granny knots just to secure that in place, and that isn't going anywhere then. Just trim that off with your scissors. You can then trim off the little bit of excess PVA that you've got there. Obviously just be careful not to cut your leader, that's the last thing you want. I'll just take these corners, again, it's not going to be really tight, but absolutely fine for the distances that we're fishing here. You will see with these that you will get a little bit of air, so best way to get rid of that air is just cut a tiny bit off the corner of that bag. And then you can just lick and stick. So I'm actually licking the back side of the bag and then pulling that down that way. And then just hold on to that. Same with the other side. Lick and stick. And that is a solid bag complete. As I said, we seem to, in the UK at least, just having a huge number of storms at the moment where we're having 40, 50, 60 mile an hour winds. The fishing conditions are obviously amazing, but trying to spot in that, you've probably seen from various underwater films how much underwater tow there can be when there's a big chop in the water, especially if you're fishing deep water as well. So my tactic always in those conditions is going to be a solid bag. And especially in the winter, I'm always going to be putting maggots in that solid bag. And the way that I prepare those maggots, obviously with them, it stops them moving. That PVA is not going to melt. I could leave that for 20 minutes, half an hour or so, and it would still be perfect to cast out. You can see it's nice and neat. All of that's obviously just going to melt down. You're going to have a really nice couple of mouthfuls. If a fish swims over that, it's going to disperse. You've got all the bits of boilie crumb all around your hook bait, and of course the maggots, the krill meal, etc, etc. If I was going to inject that, to be fair, I probably wouldn't, but I'd just inject it with a little bit of hemp oil if you like injecting your bags, and cast that out. And I'm sure if you use that method this winter, it will catch you a load and load of carp. Well, what a lovely way to end this video. Really nice scaler on this. So if you incorporate those maggot solid bags into your own fishing this winter, particularly if there's really big winds and storms, as I said, we seem to get more and more of those every single year. They are a perfect tactic for that method. They do take a little bit more effort, obviously, than your standard solid bag, but they are well worth it, especially catching carp like this. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Trakker YouTube channel for all the updates and all the new videos that we release.